It's on network, right?
Is it Earth Mama Healing or Earth Mama Network? Okay.
Okay, y'all, we're live. We're gonna wait a few minutes so we can share.
The link in the thing. Oh wait. See.
All right, cool. So I think we're ready to go. Sedalia, take it away.
Yay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sedalia King. I'm here on behalf of Sacramento Sister Circle and also Bawapa SAC for our programming now. Kate centering the leadership of Black women. Thank you so much for joining us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate you for that. We definitely want to acknowledge the folks who made this sit down possible. So definitely want to highlight some of our sponsors, including Sacramento Sister Circle, Bawapa. We also have SAC Change here. Who else? We have Mental Health First, and many others. So again, thank you for this.
And the
space.
Social Justice Political.
Yes, thank you. Social Justice Political. And again, just thank you everyone for their time and their space. And we can sort of dive right into that. So first off, this session is in follow-up to the voter guide launch that we had last year. And that was an opportunity for Black women to come together and do some deep analysis into ultimately what folks were looking at on their ballot. But we all know that just because you completed your ballot, you sent it in, the votes were counted, like that conversation doesn't just end there. There has to be this continued conversation, continued engagement. So we wanted to take that, and we also wanted to tap into honoring Black History Month last month, but also Women's History Month. And the best way to do that was to recognize the fearless legacy building of Black women community leaders in Sacramento, and also talk about like the work that they're doing and they have done, like what ultimately would it take for us to win? And especially with the women that make up this panel, winning means something different to each one of them. And because we're complex figures, and this is a complex world, and we're all working within our own capacities to try to find Black liberation. So without further ado, I'm more than happy to introduce our panel. So let's go ahead and pop them up. Yay. So first off, we have Dr. Flojane G. Kofer, the Senior Director of Policy with Public Health Advocates. We also have Ashley Draper, MBA. And plus, I also love the alphabet soup. So let me actually go back to Dr. Kofer. She has a PhD and an MPH. Ashley Draper has an MBA, and she's the Director of Outreach and Strategic Partnerships at the SAC Change Coalition. We have Alana Matthews, who is a JD and LLM. She's also the founder of the Community Justice Collaborative, also one of our sponsors here today. We have a Leslie, who is the founder of the Alliance of Frontrunners, LLC. And also later on today, we'll be welcoming Tiffany Russell Moyer, an attorney and Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Fellow. But thank you, ladies, so much for taking the time to be with us today. Hopefully, we'll start some good trouble and a little bit of history with this conversation and really get folks to be more engaged, not only with your work, but also other opportunities to make their mark in Sacramento's political atmosphere. So with that being said, we can just kind of dive right into a quick icebreaker.
Do we want to introduce our other panelists too?
Oh, who did I miss? I apologize. Oh, I am so sorry. Asantua. I'm so sorry. I was reading off my list. Forgive me. Asantua RN. I can't even believe I totally skipped her. All right. So she's a powerhouse in her own. Yes, give her screen time. She's a powerhouse in her own. She is one of the founders of MH First and also the Anti-Terror Police Project or Anti-Police Terror Project? I always mix those two up. But just a huge, huge figure in this grassroots level work when it comes to public safety or addressing public safety concerns. So again, thank you for making the time. Again, my apologies. Did I cover everybody?
We have one more person who's waiting to join the panel, and she is here.
And I'll just slide right in.
Okay.
Kula Koenig, with the founder of the Social Justice Political Corps. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Kula.
And
Okay.
one more.
And oh yes, Tiffany, I did mention you. And you're the one person. So yes, Tiffany, attorney and Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Fellow. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Double check everyone's been addressed. Cool. All right. So now we can go ahead and dive into the icebreaker. So I'm just going to read like a couple prompts, and folks, if you have experienced something like this before, feel free to just kind of raise your hand. This is sort of to show folks like what it's like to be a Black woman leader in Sacramento, but also for other women who might not be advocates or involved politically, but even in their own lives, they might be able to see you raising your hand like, oh, wow, like these are really powerful women and they have to deal with the same mess that I have to deal with too. So real fast. All right. So first question I have here is, raise your hand if you had to step up because the job simply wasn't getting done. Okay. Raise your hand if someone posted something about you that was untrue or you were misquoted. Okay. Raise your hand if you were held back because you were a threat. 2 hands. Yeah, I expect everybody's hand to go up there. Raise your hand if you were disrespected but managed to keep your composure.
And they better be happy I kept my composure.
I'm still mad about it.
I can't raise my hand on the latter part. Can we just stop at the halfway mark?
Raise your hand if you doubted your power. Okay. That's tough. And raise your hand if, all right, this is the last one. Raise your hand if you had Black women come to your aid without question. Excellent. All right, let's unpack a little bit of that.
There's a delay, so my hand is going up slow, but yes.
So yeah, just real fast, hands and feet. Real fast. Let's talk about some of your reactions to some of those prompts, and if anybody feels comfortable enough to share some of their experiences from any of them. Would it be
Well,
helpful to
the
get back to prompt?
the job wasn't getting done. I think that in a lot of spaces that we're in, we see that happen. When I had an appointment at the California Energy Commission, we were throwing around terms like diversity. And you realize that although you may have a diversity policy, you don't have diversity people at the table to implement that policy or to come up with that policy. And then the new word became equity. And so it was nice just to check the box, but the work wasn't really being done. And the people who have experienced the most inequities were still being left out. So it was a role that I had to step up and fill. And I think all of us on this panel obviously have had to do that. But that was just one example in California when we're looking at energy policy in vulnerable communities. People talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I could go on about this for days. I've been thinking a lot about the idea that, our ancestors' wildest dreams was not work, it was rest. And so and so part of that is also the freedom to be able to say the things that our ancestors didn't get to say because the threat was even larger than the threats that face all of us alive today. And so I left my last job specifically because I've always jokingly said I have a FU fund because if you don't treat me right, I'm gonna say F you and preserve my peace. And I actually ended up using that and very on the spot was just like, consider this my notice, because I was slated to give a talk right after Donald Trump was elected president. This talk had been scheduled for probably 6 months. And it was a similar talk that I had already, gotten approved, had already given many times. And I was the week before, while I was in a meeting, my previous supervisor reached out to the organizers and said I would be unable to attend without even talking to me first. And the reason I was given was because my talk wasn't approved now because I had changed the title. That was literally the only thing about it that had changed for the purposes of this event. And because given the election, racism is a sensitive topic to talk about now. And so it now has to be approved by the agency director, which was completely untrue. And the idea to tell a Black woman that a conversation about racism and birth outcomes is a sensitive topic when we've been dealing with the exact same disparity for 150 years. And you think because a white man who speaks honestly about his racist feelings suddenly changes things because he was elected 2 weeks ago, it was astonishing, right? And so I said, I'm not going to be disrespected in this way, but it was very much all the things you were talking about, Sedalia, and those questions. It was, a fear, a disrespect of expertise. It was also just a fear that of my star rising, higher than the person who hired me, which if you're a good manager should be great. You want your people to be out there and doing good work, but instead it was a threat. And so just deciding, my ancestors, I feel like were telling me in my soul, something that's very dangerous is white women who feel threatened. And so that's not a good space to stay in. And so when you see that and when they start to do sabotaging things, it's time for you to pack your bags and leave. That's not a safe space for you to be in, especially when you're not the one who's able to control the narrative. And I have never looked back and have been very happy for it.
No, that was a word because I never consider having an FU fund, but I'm thinking that me and my financial advisor are about to have a talk. No, that's excellent. Did anyone else want to tap in?
I just love reading the comments. Like, I'm trying to figure out how can I go on Facebook and comment and reply to people like Crystal over here, like, let me get my financial affairs in order because I'm gonna need a fuck you fund, right? So I'm just loving it. I'm enjoying the comments, so I stay for the comments. Y'all keep it coming.
Yeah, exactly. And if anything, you're gonna learn. If anything, folks can take away from this is like protecting your peace by having the FU fund. Like, I feel like that's a priority after hearing that. Okay. What about folks doubting your power? Anyone that one kind of hit me in my gut when I wrote it. So I'm definitely interested in hearing feedback on that.
Yeah, Sedalia, that one was the one that resonated most with me. Maybe 2 years now ago, I began working in a more design space, using human-centered design principles and looking at how best to arrive at solutions. And somewhere in there, I just felt empowered. I'm like, I can think outside of a box. Oh my goodness. And in that journey, someone said, you kind of speak up louder than others. You kind of take up a little too much space. And I know me. I know that I give room and space for others, their thoughts, their ideas, everything. I'm very welcoming of it. And usually my response would have been, oh my gosh. And I'm taking it personal and I'm changing my personality. I'm changing who I am. I said in that moment, I said, you know what? It took me 30 years to find this voice. I'm not going to be quiet. That's just it. And I recognize that it's not me that has to change. It's not me that needs to fit into this mold of what other people want me to be or want me to sound like or whatever. We, in a space of diversity, unity, equity, inclusion, need to learn each other's language. And so I'm bringing that more into a workspace. But that question resonated most with me because it can make you feel insecure. It can make you just feel like you're the problem when really that's not what it is.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that because I think for me personally in 2020, I did lose my power, right? Like if we're being honest about the moment that we lived through and what that meant to be a woman, a Black woman in 2020 with a president, the one that we did, I think it's realistic to recognize that in that moment, I didn't know how I wanted to be or who I wanted to be just because of the dangers of what that meant, right? And what that meant for me and my family. And so for me, a lot of that particular prompt really resonated with me because it took me some time to figure out to get to that spot that Ashley mentioned, which is why am I changing myself because of assholes and racists who have always existed have a platform, a larger platform, right? And so I think that's also an important conversation that we need to have or that we should have with ourselves is when we lose our power, how are we going to get it back effectively, right? And how do we use that to empower our community members, our community, our family, and et cetera. And so for me, that prompt was just, it hit my gut because it was like, dang, I was just having this conversation with myself in the mirror. Like, you are that bitch. You are that woman. You are exactly who you say you are when you wake up in the morning. And that's because you decided that you were, right? Not because you had to change it to fit into a bottle, fit into a space, or fit into a title. It was because you decided this is who I'm going to be. This is how I'm showing up as. You either accept it or you get out of the way. Either way, I'm here, right? And so I think a lot of us has to have that conversation when we talk about being a leader. We can't lead if we're constantly changing ourselves to fit the circumstances. And I think as Black women, sometimes we want to do so much so well that sometimes we do give a little leniency of who we are in our identity. And I think that's the first step of standing on the legacies that we're building upon and standing in our leadership, which is being unapologetically who we are, right? Emotions, anger, all of that, bringing that to the table. Like, look, we either gonna talk or we gonna reschedule, but this is how I'm coming to the table, period, right? And there's power in that. And I think that's kind of how we regain it. It's just being who we are, respectfully.
No, that was beautiful, Les. Beautiful. Thank you.
For me, I think
perfect. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
The feeling like powerless part for me, I came to a point where I had to tell and retell myself that the narrative I've been living by is in fact a lie. That there is nothing wrong with me, right? That the narrative is a lie and that narrative is there to make me feel disempowered, when in fact it's quite the opposite. I am powerful, right? And if I am to harness that power, then I would be a threat to the system. So it's something that, like, I tell myself regularly, the narrative is a lie. I'm the truth.
No, thank you. Again, thank you. That was, thank you. And And actually, a really great segue into diving into some of these questions that are focused on the panel. And again, we're all here because also what we saw in the aftermath of 2020 was that through Stacey Abrams's leadership, like she managed to turn the state of Georgia blue, which was something that folks have been saying that would probably never happen. It's just sort of like Georgia and Texas. Like these are states that are never going to turn blue. But in the immediate aftermath, like sort of like this whole Phoenix story, we saw her rise out of the ashes from her loss running for governor. And then she really focused on engaging folks at the grassroots level. And it was her with a great partnership of other folks at the grassroots level. And they managed to have that huge success with that state. And then the entire nation kind of rallied around her and was praising her. And she also was praising the other folks at the grassroots level for all that work that they'd done. But the deal is that like all this praise was being directed towards her, and it's a huge accomplishment. Don't ever want to take anything away from her. But also what folks were missing was that there were Black women in their own hometowns who are doing the same kind of work. And if anything, it's just because they might not have the nationwide platform, or maybe they don't have maybe they just don't have like the access to resources to get that sort of attention. But you have folks here who's doing the work. You have folks here who deserve their flowers. And we wanted to make sure we made a space and opportunity to tap into that. And also to kind of share your story, to encourage the next generation of folks who are watching you right now to be able to see that, again, the whole representation thing, like seeing you do that work and possibly feeling empowered enough to either step in or also reach out to you directly to see how they can help support what you're doing and being a part of this larger movement. So we can go ahead and get into these questions and sort of looking into that. And I'm going to pose it for the entire, the question's open for the entire panel, but I'm going to direct it to one person initially. So once that person's done answering, feel free to hop in. And the first question I have up, I'm going to direct to Alana. And that question is, how is your leadership building for the next generation of Black women?
Well, it's first, I think, making space for the next generation. I feel a part of a generation that I think we were sort of left behind. There were a lot of people who are pioneering. I have a good friend, Jay Franco Clausen, and she says, I try to be the woman I wish I would have met when I was 14. And so, I'm thankful to have a lot of mentors now, but I didn't have a lot of mentors when I first started in my legal career. And so to build the leadership, I think it's important to make space and recognize and know that you haven't fully entered into that space until you have brought somebody else with you. So what I try to do is have people, everything I'm involved in, I include people, young women, Black women, bring them along with me. I have one of my mentees who actually been working with her since she was a junior in high school and was just sworn in to the bar. So she's an attorney. That was great. But it's just taking that time. Like, you need to meet people where you are. And so even if I am an attorney, I can't just look at people who are in law school. I have to look at people who want to be attorneys and say, okay, what is it that you need? I had to make those hard decisions. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but you just make it happen. And then everything that I'm a part of, so the Community Justice Collaborative, making sure that we have Black women attorneys who are our speakers for our legal clinics, partnering with other organizations that have Black women in positions as decision makers, such as the Mutual Assistance Network, so that when we're looking at the services and how we work with our community to benefit our community, it's programs that are being serviced by our community of people that look like that. So I think it's important to build that pipeline for the next level of leadership, starting with young women in elementary, high school, college, law school, wherever it is. And then no matter what you're doing, that's one thing that BWAPA is really good about. So whatever space that you're in, if you have to work with another attorney, or if you have to work with another clinician or a nurse, or whatever it is, you're looking to see where is a sister who can take on this opportunity and be in leadership in this opportunity. So just inclusion is a very important part of it. And I want to say one other thing, because you mentioned about Stacey Abrams. And yes, people gave her the accolades, but they love Black women to be the political workhorses. And they loved Stacey Abrams turning the state blue. But they didn't love Stacey Abrams, the candidate, who could have been state blue when she was running. And so part of this question is recognize that we have to be in leadership decisions, and we can't just feel that people want us to feel. And we have to amplify the voice and sometimes demand that, okay, you like us working hard on this effort, but when it comes time to be a decision maker, a visionary, a leadership, you want to pull back. So I think all a part of building the leadership is recognize that we have to be in those leadership positions as well.
No, and that's a good question. I would also love to hear some feedback on, like, how do you avoid ending up being the workhorse? Because I feel like no matter where we're going to go in these political spaces, like, they're definitely going to look for us to be like their Stacey Abrams and do all that work, but not actually ascend to that role. So how do you avoid that situation?
I don't know if there's, I think for me, I understand that, yes, not wanting to be the workhorse. For me, I think about like a passion, like what's serving me, right? Like what's the end goal? So for me, my end goal is that I want to have, you know, a certain type of representation on our county board of supervisors or on our city council or whatever. Then I am going to be, you know, I'm going to be working hard, and I can be the workhorse to make sure that that happens. But I'm also going to be very, you know, clear about why I'm doing the work, who I'm working with, and trying to bring others along, right? So that it's not just one person, quote unquote, doing the work. But I guess my answer to that really is more, maybe this is not the right thing to say, but I guess I don't mind so much being the workhorse if I'm seeing the fruits of my labor, and I'm seeing the change I want.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely appreciate the narrative that we don't want to be the mules of the world, right? But I also think that and not that we're doing that here, but I do sometimes think that we're kind of putting on Stacey Abrams and others like her our view of that labor, and there's something about it that feels like it diminishes that role. First of all, Stacey ran for governor and was cheated out of it because of the very system that, you know, that was in place. And so what she decided to do was build this, like, if I can't get there by train, right, then I'm gonna build the tracks and have a train there so not only I can get there, but other people can too. And so I think that's also a strategy. And so sometimes I feel like part of the way that misogyny and misogynoir in particular for Black women operates is that when we're strategic, we're undermined in the way that we frame our work. And so instead of giving her kudos and saying, wow, she ran for governor, was maneuvered out of it, and then decided to create a whole new system to enable a state like Georgia to, you know, to have a different outcome than anybody thought was going to be possible, maybe in our lifetime, like it turns into, but people don't. And it's like, well, let's look and see what Stacey's going to do next, because I have faith in her. And not just because, you know, she's a Spelman woman, but because I'm watching her move and I like it. I like, she's like, I can show you better than I can tell you. And I think I just want us to also be mindful of, like, yes, we do absolutely get pigeonholed into the supportive role, into the sassy Black friend, but also sometimes I'm sassy and I'm a lot of people's Black friend, and that's going to be what it is. And don't disrespect me in that role, because my humanity allows me to be angry, to be sassy, to be sexy, to be smart, to be all of those things, and to occupy whatever roles I want to in life.
Mm-hmm. I have something to add here, if you don't mind. Say no. Just say no. One of the things that the memory that keeps coming to mind is last year during the uprisings, when all these corporations were saying, oh, we do need to invest in diversity and equity and inclusion. And my honest first response was, I will not be on your diversity and equity and inclusion task force. One of the ways that white supremacist systems thrive is by distracting us. that wasn't me, was it? Is by distracting us and by taking resources from us from building ourselves and our communities. And so say no to those. There, I think it was Angela Davis who made a quote about diversity. And it's just a corporate tactic, right? Because those systems, those structures that harm us will still exist in the process. And so say no to things that don't lead us towards Black liberation.
I just want to add to Tiffany's something about it being a distraction. One of my favorite quotes is that I always try to remind myself is focus is powerful, because there's so many things that will try to, distract you from what you're trying to work on. There's so many things that we need to be working on. And sometimes we try to do so many of them and it doesn't, we maybe fall short a little bit. And so what I also take from the Stacey Abrams example is like her just being really focused on like, here's what I want to do, right? And just like focusing on that and getting it done. And so I think that's also a way to, not let that distraction come at you, is to stay focused on where you want to go.
Yeah, and I would even add that, and Flo mentioned it a lot. She said she ran. Like, that's also something. Like, we need more Black women running. Like, no, her race did not turn out as we all wanted it to be and as it should have been, right? Again, that election was stolen from her, point blank, period, right? But like, we need more Black women to run, like, not to win, like, obviously having winning in mind, but just to start that motion. The more Black women we have running, the more can win. And I think that is also how we escape this kind of quote unquote workhorse situation where we have more Black women in these positions of power, like running, winning, and then changing, and then going back to what Kula said, which is focusing on that one issue or focusing on that thing that you want to change and going after it unapologetically. But again, it starts with running. It starts with visualizing ourselves in those positions of power. It starts with us. It starts with taking the lead, taking the mic, taking the table, taking the gavel, whatever it is, taking the position of power and turning it into a way that helps us do that mission or helps us achieve that goal or reach that purpose. And I think that's another conversation that we should be having within our circles is, when are you going to run? When are you going to run? As a Black woman, as someone that's lived these experiences that we're trying to get these organizations to understand are real and that are happening every day, when are you going to run? I want to see more Black women on every ticket across California, across the world. So what do we also need to talk about within our community, within our families, to get more Black women to run? What does that look like? Because I think that also helps us get out of these pigeonholes that we are being placed in, and that's by being the leaders of the table.
So I want to follow up on that very quickly and just to circle that point, because what happens is when we do start to run, like when Stacey ran, and she's a very qualified candidate, you still had doubters. And then nationally, you didn't have the support of the national party helping her. So she was literally flying all over this country trying to fundraise because the Democratic Party in Georgia and the National Democratic Party didn't see that race as important enough and didn't invest as much as they should have. So everybody was supportive and they loved her. And that's not to diminish her work or just saying that she's a workhorse, like to diminish her tenacity or diligence or focus. It's just to say that when we run, when Black women candidates run, we also have to realize that it means we're not just working grassroots and fundraising and all that stuff, but we're also holding the party accountable, because they're going to ask us for whatever other candidates that we go out and we work hard and we're all reaping the benefits of Stacey Abrams' work nationally, because we wouldn't have got the newest stimulus passed if we didn't have those 2 additional votes probably. So we're all benefiting on that. But then when it comes time, exactly your point, to invest in Black women candidates and to support them and to get everybody lined up, we're going to have to make that demand, because it's always made a demand of us. And if we're working to help elect county supervisors or, city council members, we're putting in all that work. But then when our candidates come forward, it's like, oh, well, okay. So that's where we have to make sure that we don't repeat that. And it's not a reflection on us. It's really a reflection on how we're viewed by others when we decide to run, or as in the instance of when Stacey Abrams, she decided to run and she worked hard. but she didn't get the support that she needed.
No, absolutely right. And you know what? That actually leads to a really good next question. Looking at like the entire systems that we're all trying to maneuver around, trying to engage with, trying to overthrow, however you want to put it. Like we're there in these spaces, but also history seems to provide another layer of context as to why a lot of our growth has been stunted. And as that more information becomes more available and also like commercialized, because now like we just recently had the release of the Black Messiah, Judas and the Black Messiah, and whereas like some of us had to pay like several thousands of dollars possibly to go to college, take a Black history or Black studies class to find out some of this information. But other folks this is like their introduction into things like COINTELPRO, or how like the Black Panther Party actually functioned, and the fact that a lot of the stuff that we're fighting for now isn't all that different from what was going on then. Maybe the talking points might have changed, but we're still fighting for Black lives. Like that still hasn't changed. So the history of organizing for Black liberation has been especially like difficult. It's probably the little air quotes the way to put it. So how can we get to victory without killing ourselves or being killed, and also like without our community being manipulated? And I'm going to direct that question to which one? I think that one goes to Asante. Oh no. That one goes to that's Asante.
It's funny, as you were asking the question, I was having all kinds of thoughts, right? Like just thinking about like how some of our elders were like mad traumatized after dealing with those COINTELPRO tactics, and like what kind of, and how sometimes it's someone coming up under them looking for the answers to those questions and not really being able to get them, right? And also, as you ask the question, I'm like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and I think perhaps some of our elders just said things, right, instead of just saying, shit, I don't know, can we figure it out together? Because I don't think that we have discovered a way, right, to continue to do this work without it being harmful to our bodies, and if not our bodies, and our psychology. And also like not putting ourselves in harm's way when it comes to like continued COINTELPRO tactics, right? And I'm well aware that even as I go about the work that I'm doing, that like I'm still Black and I'm still a woman, and at any time, at any given time, I could be disappeared, right? And that me being disappeared could be justified by my activities, right? My activist activities, or because of something I did when I was 12, or when, right, or some fake letter that someone sent that said I didn't like them, and then you know the BS continues outside of that. So I would just say that observing as much security culture as we possibly can, keeping your personal circles like tight, and also I think the best thing that we can do is have genuine relationships with each other, and it doesn't have to look like we're besties, right? It has to look like that I'm able to trust that you have my best interests in mind, and that you wouldn't turn on me, right? For just like a lack of better terms, like our best security is having genuine relationships with each other, not just as Black folks, but also like with our allies, right? Having shared agreements, right? We don't call the police, we don't, X, Y, and Z, and if we don't have those shared values, also just being aware that we don't have those shared values, and that comes from just being in genuine relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something on that too?
Absolutely.
I just want to say Asante is exactly right. It is about the relationship. Your last question was, how is your leadership building for the next generation? And the designer in me just struggles with it, because you can't build for, you have to build with. Building for is what got us in the situation that we're in today. So being deliberate in bringing it to this current question and, you know, how do we do this without killing ourselves? This work is hard. It is very hard. And so as much as you can, you need to create a space for others to join in. Many hands make light work. With SAC Change Coalition, that is the premise of our being. You know, we are purposeful and deliberate and intentional on creating sustainable relationships because we know that this work is not easy. We also know that we're not the experts in it. Sometimes the language itself of activism and of policy is inaccessible. That inaccessibility, that thing, that barrier that keeps people from helping is what needs to be taken away. Remove that, remove those different barriers to you know, having students help and interns help and whoever just has an issue with something, and you have many people. You can create a community of practice, and really it does take community. You cannot do this by yourself, and I think the sooner you accept that, the sooner you adopt a practice of building relationships and knowing, you know, scoping out who is in the playing field, I think the more successful you'll be in not just building relationships with other people, but also maintaining your peace, keeping your sanity, and like for the most important piece of it, actually advancing the efforts that you're trying to put forward.
I think. Oh,
If I
sorry.
may,
Go ahead.
I think there's something that there was a period of like my life that like the theme was like loss, right? And what it did for me was put into perspective that it took generations for us to get where we are, and that it's going to take generations for us to get out of this situation. So just mourning that the need for that, the change to happen right this second, and also understanding that the work that I'm doing is just groundwork for someone else, right, to pick up later. And it takes some of the pressure off, right? It takes some of the like, gotta grind, you know, work until I die, do it, even at my own expense, right? So for me, just centering the fact that it took generations for us to get here and it's gonna take generations for us to get out of it, allowed me more space to live while doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
That was along the lines of the thing I was going to add, which is that part of the community, which you're absolutely right is important, are our ancestors, are the people who have been doing this fight for, frankly, centuries. I think something that you said earlier was that some of the talking points are new, but you look 100 years ago at Ida B. Wells, for example, and the talking points are not new. The talking points are exactly similar. Maybe the vocabulary we use, she used at the time is not the same vocabulary, but the things that we're fighting for are the same. For example, intersectionality. You look at some of the pieces that Ida B. Wells did, and she is articulating intersectionality exactly then, exactly the way that we articulate it today. And it's one of my biggest frustrations when I'm in organizing spaces, which is that we think that our ideas are new. You know, we think that our tactics are new. And so we don't end up building on the knowledge that people that our ancestors put out there for us to build upon. And that's really where some of our fatigue, where we can mitigate some of our fatigue, because we can look at some of those lessons learned and then try new tactics and then put pressure on top of the tactics that were laid before. Yeah, I'll leave it like that.
Okay, anyone else with thoughts on that one? Okay, no, I really appreciate hearing the connection and also the worry, because I don't think that folks, that we have enough opportunity to have an open conversation about, like, in the midst of this work, you do have genuine worries, and also looking back on what the elders have done. You're like constantly assessing and trying to not only protect your community, but yourself. And sort of within that context, I'm going to direct this next question to Tiffany. So everyone and their mama right now, and sort of like the flip side of this, like everybody and their mama are talking about equity. And even more specifically, it's like racial equity. And we're seeing these folks like taking knees out of solidarity or throwing kente cloth over their shoulders and making these grandstand proposals and things like that. So with all the kente cloth drapery and these gestures of solidarity, how has this impacted your work in trying to fight for like Black liberation or Black justice, or what your grounding sources? How has that impacted your work?
I don't feel like I have anything nice to say about this.
I'm not nice.
You know, I think what it's done is really, really given folks who like gaslighting more opportunities to gaslight us. You know, whereas before we were having conversations like equity does not exist in this space, and people are saying like, we don't have time for that, you know, like racism doesn't exist here. And now they're saying, oh, we care about equity, we recognize we're kind of racist, but we're doing better without actually without actually addressing it, without actually putting structures in place to address it. And that's one of the reasons why I said say no before, because I'm just thinking of in my current employment. I currently work for Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and it was one of the places that I said, no, I'm not going to be on a committee. But what they did was get out of my way. And so they gave me a lot of leadership opportunities where I didn't have to talk about equity, because I'm now in a position where I get to bring opportunities forward that are directly related to Black liberation. And so I don't need to engage in a structure that's existed for centuries. Well, actually, the institution I work for is only existed for decades, but this structure has existed for decades with no significant destruction of that white supremacist structure. I am not going to be responsible for doing that now. And so I think it makes the work harder, because now that folks have the opportunity to be able, or folks are more aware of the language that's acceptable to describe what some of the issues are. We also have to elevate our thought processes for addressing them, and that not being placated by them using the right language, but instead asking for very specific actions that make people get out of our way.
But we also have to realize that's hard to do, because we'll call them out for things like that, but then they'll write Black Lives Matter in the middle of the Capitol Mall. So like, it's also, I feel like
that's not enough though. And I think that's what Tiffany's saying, is that there's so many great quotes. I've just been writing them down. Tiffany, as you were talking, I was reminded of just in my day job, trying to talk to a funder who was like, well, yeah, we just want to help. Everything that's going on is so sad. We just want to do better. And I'm like proposing like real shit that can actually like make a difference. And then they're just like, ooh, well, that's too much. Well, I'm not sure. How's our staff gonna like get to be involved in this? And like, it was more, they just wanted the more I learned about it, it was that they just wanted this photo op versus an actual like opportunity to make change. And I think we did, and I called it out. You know, I was just like, well, this is what we're trying to do, and what you're having here, that's not helping. And it's just because it's really frustrating. And so I think we really, like Tiffany said, we just have to call it out and be like, this is performative, and we don't want performative anymore. We're not going to do that. And your great point about the dialogue, people are using the language, they're co-opting the language, but they're not doing the work. And so that's why we have to really be specific about what does this mean and what are the outcomes.
Absolutely, Kula. I was most struck by last summer in the city of Sacramento when one of the deputy chiefs for the police department was like, well, we're reimagining public safety. And I was like, no, that's our language. Don't do that. Don't do that. Like, that's not what you're doing. You're policing and you're trying to steal our language. Like that's not okay. I think a lot of it is that, you know, when it comes to actually doing equity work, there's not a way to institutionalize it. And so it becomes a one-off. It becomes people want to talk about their feelings or their intentions and not actually get down to the practical things that have to be done, and that have to be changed. And so every organization needs to like put their money where their mouths are and say, if you're not asking every single one of your staff, from your executive director to your entry level staff, to have as their performance goals how they're going to be approaching equity, and that then is a requirement for them, you're not going to get there, right? Because it can't be the optional. I mean, not only I share everybody's sentiments that the diversity team is disrespectful in some way, but it's also often unpaid, disrespected labor that is heaped upon people of color, and then people don't even listen to you when you come up with things, right? So if you're going to have a diversity team, and you're going to ask people to do that with no extra pay, the least you should do is implement every single thing they tell you to do. Like, because as Kula always says, don't waste my time, right? like don't have me out here doing this, and then you're not gonna do anything with this. So that's at minimum, at least give them carte blanche that whatever they say goes, you are going to then put into place. But secondly, it should be tied to everybody's work. Like, if this is what we're here for, if this is a priority, then everybody should be evaluated during performance review time on, so what did you do this year for equity? How did you what were your contributions? Because that's one of the ways to actually make this a priority. And if you're not doing that, lose my number.
Exactly.
Just $1.
Yes. Everything. Yes. And so you brought up the deputy chief. I thought you were going to talk about last summer when our mayor got on stage and wanted to be a part of memorializing George Floyd. But he got up there and he goes, Black Lives Matter. And I could have sworn the next week he increased the police budget. I cannot with performative. If you're not going to back it up, if you're not going to actually do anything towards policy, why are you talking? Why are we engaged in this conversation? And I think that's, to Tiffany's point, the saying no is because we know what that means. We know what it looks like when you're trying to bait us in conversation. You're trying to distract us with this little carrot over here. No, we're not biting.
I'm with you, Ashley. I have a thing where if you have institutional power, you shouldn't be out in the streets protesting. What I need you to do is do your job. So I don't want to see, people with actual power. Go take a vote, go call a meeting, go do something. The kneeling in the street, the people who are doing the protesting are because we're trying to get you to do something. Don't emulate us. Do the thing we're asking you to do.
It's almost mockery.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Also, quick time check. It's 6:22. Are folks okay with staying on just a little bit longer and doing one more question, and then the following question will close out? Is that okay with everyone? Okay, good. Thank you for being flexible. I appreciate y'all. Yeah. And you know what? So sort of tagging into that, like these are all like really big complications, like dealing with folks who might be elected, appointed, or just overall in any sort of leadership position, and they're not hearing you, or they're hearing you, but they ain't doing nothing about it. So, like in each of your capacities, like, what do you see in the future for leadership of Black women in Sacramento, and then also across the nation, like kind of dealing with all these things we highlighted? And I'm directing that question to Flo.
Oh gosh. So say it again, Sedalia. What are we seeing across the nation?
What do you see in the future for leadership of Black women in Sacramento and
across the nation?
Yeah.
Well, I see us occupying those spaces, right? And I see us not just occupying the spaces of leadership, but actually directing the narrative. I think, Black women, especially in Sacramento, because I'm here and I see so much of the way that things are moving, are stepping into the role as, in the name of Christi's, organizing our rightful place, right? At the helm of a lot of this work, and saying, this is where we should be. We have ideas, we have something to contribute. And if you don't do what we want, we'll literally build something around you. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things that I love about, initiatives like MH First, was just like, if you're not going to be the right emergency response that we need, we'll just build one around you. If you're not going to, give us the media we want, we'll build one around you. Like, we will do that. And to Tiffany's point, it kind of reminds me of actually learning those lessons from the past, right? I think a lot about the fact, that the Montgomery bus boycott in the way it was set up was essentially, the Uber and Lyft of, the 1950s, right? It was like we created an entire transportation network. And I think now we're learning that that's what we should, like, if we're not going to get it, we'll build it. And then all of a sudden now it becomes possible and people want to step in and get behind it. And so I think just continuing to build what we want to see and standing behind it is the most powerful thing that we can do. And I think that's what I see us doing. That's what I see happening across the nation, is Black women saying, all right, we're ready and we're just going to do it because that's what's necessary. And there's a space, I think, for it. And I think there's an appetite for it. I think there are co-conspirators that are around that are also willing to engage as well, right? But people are what we have. That is our greatest, our greatest blessing, or I hate to call it a resource because that's very capitalist language, but that is the richness of this experience that we're calling, the human experience. And so the more that we can lean into the ways that we can help each other, the mutual aid of it all, I think the better off we end up being, because we end up building something so much better than trying to force institutions that don't necessarily want us to cave, right? It's just showing them, like, this is what we can do.
Excellent. Anyone else wanted to chime in?
I would just echo what Flo said, realizing that this is our moment. And it's not our moment because somebody gave it to us. It's our moment because we took it. We just stood up, showed up. And so now we're here when nobody else was willing to be there. So for those of us who are not a part of leadership has a lot of different faces. And so just don't think that you're a leader because you're out front and you're, making the statement, you're the public face. There's leaders in supporting the movement.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So whether that's donating or whether that's, saying, hey, let me buy you some lunch, or let me just go, you've been working hard. They've been coming down on you. How can I be supportive of you and make sure that you got dinner tonight? Or how can I just do something? I can help you out. It's leadership in community, bringing people together. Who can amplify or making a connection between somebody else. It can be leadership in just communication. Just like Flo said, if you don't want to have our media, you don't want to let us in there, we'll do a workaround. So maybe you have that gift of that. So just recognize leadership comes in a lot of different forms. And I think that we have to occupy all of those spaces to make sure we're supporting each other and we're doing what we need to do in our.
No. And you know what? Part of me just realized, like, that so spaces like these also kind of include that piece. Like, if we're, again, like, if folks aren't necessarily going to, like, highlight Black women and also just generations of Black women doing this sort of work, then we can create our own spaces. We can hold our own talks. And we can, like, make sure we meet one-on-one, have these conversations. And, like, share with the next generation of folks, share with our community, like, what kind of work we're doing, what barriers we're facing. So all of you in spaces like this is just emblematic of the fact that y'all don't give a fuck. So
Dolly, can I add, because to this whole conversation, there's something that's been kind of like gnawing in the back of my head is
Ula.
No, and it's about because we keep saying, Black women, and we're doing this work. And I think we have to be clear about what the work is, the work for liberation, the work for social justice, because, we're not a monolith. And there are some folks come at things in different ways to get at social justice. or some folks come at things that may be more of a self-interest and not an uplifting of the community. And so I just also, and that's a whole different conversation, but you know, it's something that it keeps gnawing in the back of my head. And then also one of the things that we need to do is, how do we have conversations with us as Black women who are working towards social justice and Black liberation, but then maybe we're not as in agreement, or we feel some different type of way about how you're moving about something, but how do we do that in love? So there's just a few different ways to, think. It's been gnawing at me, and it's a deeper, nuanced conversation.
Same, Kula, same, ditto, everything. I don't know if we have time in this space and in this conversation, but the fact that this group of Black women can come together, acknowledging each other's efforts, lifting each other up in that effort. You know better than anyone else the struggle that I'm going to face in this role, in this position. You know better than anyone else how much it'll hurt me, the things that you say, or the things that you post that are negative. We know how best to hurt each other. We also know how best to support each other. So that goes back to Alana's point when she's like, you can be a leader by hitting me up and asking me, have I eaten today? Or, how can I best support you? Definitely a conversation for another time. But Kula, you're absolutely right to raise it, because we do a lot of work to tear each other down. In this space, when we're fighting literally the world, I would hope that as Black women, we can know at least enough to be unified. I may not agree with how you do it. I may not agree with what you say. I don't particularly like to cuss all the time, or do cuss all the time, but if that's how you express yourself, go ahead, sis. Like, do you. We can do all of that and respect each other and uplift each other and pray for one another all at the same time.
No, and that's perfect, because if anything, I forget who mentioned, it might have been Asantwa. She mentioned earlier that by having relationships with one another, it builds that trust, especially like she was speaking about, like worried about the elders and like how COINTELPRO Pro was able to manipulate them in their spaces. And that's a preventative measure to build relationships, but also to be able to approach each other with love when we're moving different types of ways. And maybe we need to tap in. Maybe you do need like someone to kind of come check you a little bit, but to do so with love. And in order to do that, you would need to have a relationship with some of these women. So, and yeah, this is just another space. I'm sure, like, I don't know everyone here, but now that I see faces and whatnot, like, I'm definitely going to be like more approachable, right? So definitely want to make sure that folks know that this isn't going to stop here. We're going to continue these conversations. We're going to continue building and growing. Like, again, like this conversation, like it kind of jumped off with the voter launch, and then we're trying to catch up and continue the conversation here. And definitely expect me to reach out sometime in the near future to keep y'all engaged, because I know y'all are doing crazy amounts of work, and you're going to need the community support. You're going to need each other's support, and you're also going to need the platform to get the message out there. And we want to make sure that y'all know that this is a space for it and that this is a resource to you. And sort of segueing into that question, the final question of the night, how can the community support your work? And that's open to anyone.
I will go. So, my work is twofold. It's one, trying to get information to people in Sacramento about what's happening at local government meetings and how it relates to social justice. And so that's, by joining the Social Justice Political Corps. So it's socialjusticesac.org. You can join us. You can attend a government meeting, and there's a simple report and tell us what happened so that we can be able to share it in the veins, again, of Many Hands Light Work. It's like, we all can't be everywhere, but if you can sign up for a specific meeting and report back on what happened, that would be wonderful. The other endeavor that is also to raise funds for people who are social justice minded. So me and some folks started a social justice political action committee to raise money for candidates who are about that social justice life. And And, we're going to be reaching out to folks. We're building our website right now. We're going to be reaching out to folks for fundraising because, that money, right, for people to run. That's what a lot of times when we're not running because, we need that monetary support. So that's just kind of some of the work that I'm doing and how I would love support.
I'll go on behalf of SAC Change. SACchange.org. Check us out. Our group assembled out of, the heart of the protests of last year. And with that, we've been on fire ever since. Our two main goals are to unseat the district attorney, Anne Marie Schubert, and to get Scott Jones the heck out of here. So as Kula was talking about earlier, being laser focused, that is where our focus lies. We're very much interested in everything else that goes on in the community. But if you want to be about that action, about getting the DA up out of here and replacing her with someone who is more progressive, who is ready, who is more qualified, hello at SACchange.org or SACchange.org is how you connect.
Can I just make a connection real quick? I just want to talk about ecosystems. Again, if we're going back to Many Hands Light Work, okay? So if Ashley's talking about, they're really laser focused on the DA, right? And DA race and getting that candidates and all that stuff ready, right? Then you've got an organization like mine who's also just trying to get people, the wider audience who maybe isn't seeing this every day, to know who's the DA, what does the DA even do, what happens, how does that even affect us, right? Because then
the election,
pay attention to that. What's an election? All of that stuff, right? And then on the other side, trying to raise money so that if SAC Change is able to get a really good candidate, maybe we can fund that candidate. So we don't all. I haven't been to one of Ashley's meetings and she hasn't been to the PAC meeting because we can't do everything, but what we're doing is supporting each other to that goal. And that's how we're going to win.
Yes. Thank you. Draw the picture of the ecosystem because that is a part of the accessibility or inaccessibility to civic action. People just cannot connect the dots. Kula is exactly right. So to be a part of either one of these is helping both.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to round it out and talk about what the Community Justice Collaborative does, because we want to raise the money to create a better system. We want to get a candidate to get a better system, but we need to understand what a better system is. So the Community Justice Collaborative is focused on racially informed, race-informed, trauma-informed criminal justice solutions that recognize the humanity of people and recognize also that just because you have public safety does not mean you have to compromise any other principles that criminal justice reform supports. So what we do is we allow, we put on free legal clinics every month. And Tiffany has been one of our presenters and we love that. And she's definitely about the intersectionality of disability and incarceration. So we want to look at how do we do that differently, but also we want to also look at how we do criminal justice in general different so that it is survivor focused, accountability based, racially equitable, even though that's a term, we know what we're really talking about, and public safety driven so that we're keeping not only just public safe, but everybody in the community safe. So that's how we're just rounding it out. So we got the bottom row. So the way that you can support that is you can go to communityjustice.us. If there is a question that you have or there's information that you want to learn, let us know. We don't dictate the information we want to bring. We want the community to let us. And I go into my legal network and I say, okay, how can we provide this information free of cost to the community so that your needs are being met and that we are creating a system that actually works for all people when we're looking at justice.
Mm-hmm. And Tiffany?
I'm afraid I'm going to unravel that roundness you just made because it sounds a little bit like this is a criminal justice panel to some degree. I guess I'm not really sure where to begin. So in my day job as an attorney, I am really looking at different ways to reduce the impact of the carceral system. So that looks like jail, that looks like the sheriff's department, looks like all the things y'all just mentioned, and also limit the law enforcement's interactions with the public altogether. And that can look like many different things, but my ask for folks who are curious about connecting is to loop me in when you're having these conversations. You know, I've been in Sacramento for almost 5 years now, exclusively looking at these issues. And I want to share everything that's in my head and contribute to those strategies, especially as we talk about building on each other's knowledge and not fatiguing ourselves. The other thing I want to shout out is one of the coalitions that I helped to found, which is Decarcerate Sacramento, which is working to dramatically reduce the jail population in Sacramento County and has had some successful, had some wins as of late, and happy to talk about some of that more. We definitely could use some more visionaries in that coalition if folks are interested.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tiffany. And I believe we have Flo up next.
This is a really great question in terms of how to support. I would say, several of the things that have already been named are things that I support and am involved with. So I would say, please, ditto to all of those. I certainly social justice, Politicore in particular, and making sure that we have a PAC, because again, we can provide our own direct support to candidates that are running, and to push for the things that we really want to see happen in our communities. And it's nice to be able to do our own recruitment and to be able to come to people and say, you seem great, would you run? And we have some money for you, right? So just want to echo that. I also want to encourage people to get involved with the People's Budget Sacramento. Another great way to really help to influence how the money in our region is being spent. It's a great way to keep an eye on, I think, some of the most important policy decisions that we make, outside of those that are determining where our state resources are going or where our local resources are going. And so that's a great way to get involved and be a part of that, especially because we know that the city and county just got in, several $100 million between them of new funds. And so we need to be paying close attention to where those are going, so they don't go to the sheriff like they did last time. So I think that's another place that people can get involved. And then I do work, my day job is Public Health Advocates. We are a statewide policy advocacy organization, and we are doing a whole host of work, both at the local and state level. And so you can always sign up to be part of our advocacy list. We're doing COVID response work. We do transgender health and transgender justice work. We work with boys and men of color. We work with a group called All Children Thrive, an initiative that focuses on policy change at the local level in cities to be able to protect the future of children. There's so much in the way of work that our organization does across the state. And so it's always helpful for you to sign up and stay involved and join in when we need to rally and create an echo chamber of support for those initiatives.
Excellent. Thank you, Flo. And finally, Aless.
Sorry, I was having mute problems. So thank you for inviting me. I'm actually here on behalf of a business that I started last year. It came out of the result of my own race running for Assembly District Delegate within the California Democratic Party. During my race, I realized in a place like SAC, there were so many people who just didn't understand what was happening, right? Whether that was who was in the positions that was creating these decisions, that was impacting their lives, to just how they register to vote or how where they turn in their ballots. And so I really created this business to create a space where we are meeting folks, like a lot of us mentioned today, meeting folks where they are and educating them on where can they go to exercise their political power, where can they go to get these answers, where can they hold these folks that are not making decisions. And shout out to South SAC, because I spent so much time out there, and everywhere I went, they was like, you know what, this is the first time I've ever spoke to someone who was running. I've never had this conversation. I've never had anyone ask me, what do I think about my community? And I think that is just ridiculous in a place like Sacramento, where we have, it is the capital of the largest state in the country, the most richest state in the country. And there are folks literally next door to the capital of what's happening. And I just think that is one of the biggest issues that we have when it comes to changing the face of power and giving our folks the mobilizing power they need to build the communities that they can have pride and excellence and just happiness in where they live. And so I created this space to meet people where they are, educate them on what their power is as a voter, as a resident of Sacramento County, and just doing it in a way that's digestible, doing it in a way that they can go on and realize the personal things that they are experiencing, from not having a grocery store to not having access to affordable housing, to not still having the vaccine despite being in these different these sectors that are supposed to be having firsthand, first come, first serve to these things, like all of these things impeding their ability to really progress forward and really live their lives. And so I created this space so that we can talk about it in a way that's relatable, in a way that's digestible, and in a way that empowers folks to get involved in a way that they can, right? Not everybody can show up to these meetings. Not everyone can do this because we're working multiple jobs to make ends meet. So meeting them where they are, using social media, using text messages, calling, like doing these things that are literally very easily accessible to get them to understand where their power is, right? Not through their elected, but where their power is and which is their focus. And so I've kind of just really been trying to focus on South Sac and really igniting the power and just the natural born advocates that we have in that area and get them to, come into this space. Like we said, I think our power lies when we combine and we work together. And I just think there's a lot of untapped leaders out there in South Sac. And so I've really been focusing my efforts on bringing them to the table and letting them know, like, hey, y'all have power. This is y'all city. I don't care who's in those positions. You live here, so you should decide what happens here. And so let me help you. Let me help you in my role as in my day job, I work in the California State Legislature. So I work with this process. And so I use my knowledge of what the process looks like to get these lobbyist groups, right, out of the way and get the people into these processes and getting them into these testimony rooms and getting them to call in and getting them to post about some of these bills that are just completely missing the mark, but get off of the money, right? And so that's kind of what I've decided to do. And then I've also been so fortunate to be able to work with Kula on the Social Justice PAC, and as well as get involved a little bit with the People's Budget of Sacramento. So just again, really honing in on that message that we are all connected in some kind of way. And that is how we are going to progress our people, our community, our women forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alas. That was just perfection, what we wanted to show. Some folks who are a little more seasoned and navigating the political realm. And then we have the newcomer in here ready to shake some shit up. So definitely.
Let me shake.
But no, definitely. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing your stories and your experiences. It's just a wealth of knowledge is here. And also, I would be completely remiss if I didn't bring up ultimately what introduced me to a lot of y'all here. And the fact that 3 years ago today was the Stephon Clark murder, and ultimately changed the entire landscape for Sacramento. And we're still figuring out what things look like in the aftermath. We're still pushing for change. And it just seems all that more necessary that we did have this conversation today. And also just in complete defiance to the fact that it seems that some of our leaders just kind of want that situation to be done. And clearly it's not, because we're still here. We're still activated. We're still organizing. And we're still making these relationships, because that was sort of the origin for a lot of our movement right now. So if anything, I just want to acknowledge that, and then also thank you for your tirelessness and all your efforts. And then also, again, I want to highlight, in closing, I want to highlight our sponsors one more time. And let me see if I can actually read off these names without messing up too badly. Again, Dr. Flores and Kofer with Public Health Advocates. We have Ashley Draper with Sac Change Coalition, Alana Matthews with the Community Justice Collaborative, Leslie Alliance's Frontrunners, Tiffany Moyer, an attorney and Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Fellow, Kula with the Social Justice Political, and Asantua with MH First and the Anti-Police Terror Project. Of course, we want to acknowledge the sort of the mother and brainchild of all these experiences.
No.
No,
I love you, Christi.
They have
Mama.
the head wears the crown, and that was Sacramento Sister Circle. The crown is big, y'all, and it's shiny. But thank you, Christi, for providing the space, the opportunity, and also to Earth Mama Network, Healing Network, for doing all the videos and switching us around and everything, making me a little dizzy. We got it. But it looks amazing because it was a whole production, and it's all Black women running this, and I could not be more proud to be in the space with you all. And if anything, I look forward to seeing you all again. Any closing messages from the folks before we actually sign off?
I just wanted to say that it is so awesome to see all of us together, especially within this COVID situation. We haven't been able to convene, but we had an exceptional conversation. Thank you for everybody that joined us and made comments. And please look up the information and join folks, because there's a lot of great work that is happening here in Sacramento by and for Black women. And we just need to know more about it. And this won't be the last time we'll do this. We did it before the election. We always have a voter guide, so we'll continue to do that. But we're going to continue to be actively involved in sharing the work that we're doing. And if you're not a part of the Sacramento Sister Circle and you're a Black woman of the age of 18, then you need to join us immediately.
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 Yes. Yeah. But
thank you guys. This was so powerful, so beautiful. I love you guys.
Love, all the love. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Thank you.